Thank you, Christian. Good morning and welcome to a meeting of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, Legal Affairs Committee. I'm Russell Yee. I am the chair for March. And let's see, we should start off. So let me just give you a preview. We'll have roll call, public comment, and then we have 3 items to discuss. These are items from agenda item number 10 in the full commission's March 8th agenda. We'll be discussing preparations for the March 22 to 24 interviews of our candidates for VRA Counsel and Litigation Counsel. The 3 items we'll discuss today are the evaluation worksheet that we'll use as we evaluate the written applications and the interviews, the questions for the candidates, and we want to settle on final list of questions. We want to ask all the candidates same questions, and then make provision for our council coverage for this process. And then we'll end with public comment as well. And I anticipate that we won't go past 11 a.m. This should be a fairly brief meeting. So let's see, I guess I should ask Marion perhaps to our council to call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Sadwani?
Here.
Commissioner Toledo?
Here.
Commissioner Yee?
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. And that is the complete Legal Affairs Committee. Let's go to public comment. Katie, I'd like to ask you to read the instructions and invite any callers.
Yes, Chair. Good morning. In order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the commissioners will be taking public comment by phone. To call in, dial the telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853-5247. When prompted, enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed. It is 969-8065-6065 for this meeting. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you will be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press star 9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says the host would like you to talk and to press star 6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure to mute your computer or live stream audio to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak. And again, please turn down the live stream volume. And the Legal Affairs Committee is taking general public comment at this time. And we do have a caller with their hand up, and I will open the line for them. And the floor is yours.
Good morning. I read the legal counsel interview questions that were posted yesterday afternoon, and I do have a few suggestions. First, I would suggest asking the Voting Rights Act VRA applicants what steps they recommend before the release of census data to expedite the line drawing process. And in the same way that you're consulting with your line drawers on adapting to delays, you will want to ask the attorneys or advice about what you should do before getting the data that could help to speed up the process after receiving the data. Second, on question number 2, it asks litigation counsel how they would work with VRA counsel, but you fail to ask VRA counsel how they would work with litigation counsel. How applicants will work as a team seems a critical question for both. And third, I recommend that you ask them how they envision working with the line drawer and general counsel, again, to ensure that you have the best overall team. Fourth, the VRA question number 2, based on the language you use elsewhere, I think you mean coalition districts, not collapsed districts. And 5, the VRA question number 13, you may want to strike or amend the first sentence. The public is likely to mix up the word fairness with the term partisan fairness, which I learned from your prior legal trainings, and it is not a criteria in California. And finally, you may want to lengthen the time of each interview. Expecting VRA applicants to answer 13 questions in 50 minutes doesn't leave much time to demonstrate the depth of their knowledge on any given question. I want to thank you for serving on this commission, and I hope this feedback helps. And thank you from all Californians that you're doing just such a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, caller, for your attention to these draft questions and these excellent suggestions. Any other callers?
Yes, we do have one more caller. I will open the line. And the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Renee Westa Lusk, R-E-N-E-E. Last name is W-E-S-T-A. Then there's a hyphen, and then it's Lusk, L-U-S-K. I just have a few questions. I don't think they're on today's agenda, but one of them is on the timeline for the educational presentations. Do you expect those to go beyond May, like through the summer? And I have questions regarding the public input meetings that are supposed to start in June. Are you going to be going by some of the same allowances the former CRC 2010 Commission allowed, such as they were allowing communities if there were members who wanted to give public input at a public in-person hearing, they could attend another in-person hearing in another part of the state and still give public input at that meeting. I realize you're going to have all virtual meetings, but will you allow people from other regions to give public input if they missed the virtual several meetings for their region? And I also wanted to know, are you going to be giving directives of what community of interest public input you want to hear from communities, and also explain what you don't want to hear, and cautioning the public that if they spend too much time on certain things that are not relevant to their public input for why they should be in a community of interest, that maybe that testimony will be negated or thrown out as part of the community of interest they're trying to represent if it gets too off the main points you are looking for. Those are my questions, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Westa-Lusk. Indeed, we are only discussing Legal Affairs Committee matters today, but those are all excellent questions, and I hope you can save them for when the full commission meets and can respond in more detail. I will say briefly, yes, we absolutely will be doing outreach probably throughout the summer and making full use of the time, the extra time that we have this cycle. Any other callers?
Nope, that was it, Chair.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment then. Thank you so much, Katie. I neglected to say, I wanted to apologize for the Legal Affairs Committee. For those who have been following this process, we did have these interviews originally scheduled for February 18th. We had to reschedule them because of urgent business that came up for the commission. And so this process got delayed a month. And so I apologize for that, as well as for yesterday's. There's a bit of confusion about whether we would have this discussion yesterday that we're going to have today. And it ended up landing on today. So here we are. So let's go ahead and take a look at why don't we start with let's go from easier to harder, maybe. Let's start with the evaluation worksheet. There's a draft of that in the meeting handouts. It sets out 8 general areas to evaluate the candidates. This same worksheet for the litigation candidates as well as the VRA candidates. And the idea would be for the 3 of us on the Legal Affairs Committee to use this to structure our evaluation individually as we look at the candidates before we meet later this month together, and as well as during the interviews and in our subsequent discussions. So 8 areas. In each, we would jot down our own observations and comments, and as well for each 8, rank each item as exceeds, meets, or lags with pluses and minuses if needed. So it's not a strictly, it's not a numerical evaluation, and it leaves room for looking at the evaluations in various ways. There's not just a single bottom line that we're going to compare. This is not a competitive bid or other, type of a situation where we would, just have a number that we would rank 1, 2, 3. But in the end, to use these evaluations to rank the various candidates, the 3 VRA candidates, the 3 litigation candidates in order, and eventually come to a recommendation to forward to the full commission. So discussion on the evaluation worksheet.
I'll just jump in and get us started if it's
Sure.
if it's okay.
Yes.
This is looking great, so I'm very excited about the direction that we're moving in. A couple of thoughts that just immediately jump out at me is if for other factors, that's pretty broad. Overall fit to CRC identity, values, and goals. Any other factors? I wanted to raise the one comment that the person who called in for the first public comment raised, and I recognize that she was raising that in terms of the questions that we ask, but I do think it's fair to think through where on this evaluation might be some assessment of our of seeing these 2 different legal teams as being a part of the team, working with the line drawer, working with the commission, and everyone feeling confident about that. I do think that that's an important piece moving forward, especially as we're ramping up with a number of experts from the line. The line drawer also will have a lot of knowledge, of course, in redistricting and VRA, and I do want to make sure that we're able to capture somewhere this notion of being able to gel well with the team and to work collaboratively. I think that could fall under other factors, but perhaps we want to be more explicit somewhere on that.
Good thought. So maybe something like potential to work well with CRC staff and other counsel, staff, line drawer, and other counsel.
I like that.
Okay. You add that to other factors. Or maybe just add that as an item on its own. It's pretty major. Any other thoughts? If not, we can just make that change and go ahead with this worksheet, and we'll be using that individually as we get prepared for later this month, as well as during the actual interview and decision process.
Sure. I don't know if we want to discuss it now, but I think one of the pieces that we're going to have to start thinking about, and it could be a part of this conversation or later, whether or not individuals are bar certified here in California, as well as for conflicts of interest, declared, undeclared. If there are undeclared conflicts of interest, how do we want to handle that? I don't know if we want to have this conversation here as a part of the evaluative worksheet, or if we want to have that separately, but I do think that that's something that we'll need to address.
I was just thinking that myself. And for number 2, maybe we can add needed credentials as a further item.
Needed
That's easy.
credentials makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Conflicts of interest. Yeah, okay, let's talk about that. If our research uncovers undeclared conflicts of interest, do we intend to inquire about that directly during the interviews? I imagine there's a whole range of potential such conflicts, very minor to perhaps very worrisome. So,
Yeah, that's right. And I think what I'd like to just hear, from both of you and from council as well, if there's thoughts here of what are we thinking that we would want to do? Like how would we assess conflicts that have not been declared? I recall when I applied for the commission, I forgot about a small campaign donation that I had made, and it was minor. It was under the what is it, $2,000 threshold or something like that, and it was brought to my attention, and I added it to my application. Is that the kind of approach that we want to take, or is if people have failed to disclose their potential conflicts of interest, does that disqualify them from serving as our counsel? I have some thoughts about that, but I'd be curious to hear what others are thinking.
perhaps we should mention that in our qualifications, conflicts of interest are not automatically disqualifying.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of discretion for us. So certainly, we'll need to have a relationship of trust with whoever we hire. So no, any serious undeclared conflicts of interest would put that trust at risk. Commissioner Toledo?
In terms of conflict of interest, I think we clearly asked for the applicants to make known any conflicts of interest that they have, and I think if for some reason some conflicts of interest were left out because they were not perceived as being substantial or for whatever reason, I think the applicants would have an opportunity, if we raise it through the interviewing process, to make those items public and known to both us and for us to be able to weigh that in our deliberations, if there are any substantial conflicts of interest that might cause us or the public to perceive that there may be an impartiality issue.
So shall we, commit to following up declared and undeclared conflicts of interest and any undeclared conflicts of interest in the interview?
So I guess I have a question for you and for staff, and that's have we identified any conflict of interest that are substantially that were not reported? I mean, we don't need to know who the applicant is, but are there any conflicts of interest that have been identified and were not included in the application process?
We are in process of doing research on all the candidates. I'm a little hesitant to report on any details. I would say that the potential is definitely there that items will be discovered. It's not a remote possibility.
Okay, so there's a possibility that there might be some undisclosed conflict of interest at this point. Okay.
I mean, there may be some points of interpretation, what constitutes a conflict of interest, but nevertheless, I think there will be items to raise.
So I'd like Marion to maybe weigh in on the definition for conflict of interest as per our provisions, constitutional and statutory provisions, as well as just our any relevant provisions that we should be taking into consideration and
Yes, 8253 of the Government Code, subdivision A5, says that the Commission shall apply the conflicts of interest listed in paragraph 2 of subdivision A of section 8252 to the hiring of staff to the extent applicable. So it's really to the extent applicable is the critical language that gives the Commission, it's not an absolute disqualification like it was for the commissioners, but it is certainly something to be considered.
Thank you.
And thank you, Marion, for clarifying that. And to that end, I feel like, as we have said with some of the staff hires that we've made, with our line jar, this did come up, right? There was a member of their team that was very much associated with the Democratic Party. I don't anticipate that we would be hiring counsel that's entirely partisan neutral in a very partisan process like redistricting. Or certainly it's a very partisan process in other states. So to the extent that they're involved in other states, of course, that will be the case. I think for me, the real issue is disclosure, that we are aware of their partisan ties, of their personal ties with various political parties, or interests that are associated with those parties. Certainly, I think it's perfectly fair if any of those applicants have additional pieces that they want to disclose, that they could contact the commission between now and the time of their interview and provide additional disclosures. I would feel very comfortable with that. And certainly, we will continue in our research of all of the individuals involved, because I do think it's a serious matter. I don't think having hidden interests is something that we should take lightly.
Indeed, for the 2010 Commission, such political interests were the primary point of contention in deliberating between the different candidates. So. By the way, this is a small meeting. Just jump right in. You don't need to recognize.
So for me, it's an issue of impartiality and perception to the public, and so it's really important, as Commissioner Sidwani has pointed out, that we have public disclosure, so that because it's transparency that ultimately is what the commission is, what is paramount to the commission, and what we would want to ensure that the public has the full information, and that we have full information before moving forward with any candidate when it comes to conflict of interest.
That's right. So we're comfortable with simply the intention to follow up on declared and any undeclared conflicts of interest in the interview.
Have we reached out to, just in terms of process, are we reaching out to, I just want to make sure that the process is standardized for all the candidates, and as I'm sure it is, but I just want to make sure that if we are reaching out to one applicant, that we're reaching out to all of them and giving them an opportunity, if we haven't already done so, to provide additional information on conflict of interest, if for some reason they didn't do so in the application process.
Yeah, that wasn't really our intention to go back to individual candidate applicants and say, oh, by the way, can you tell us more about this?
Sure.
So in that sense, they're all being treated equally. At this point, I don't. Yeah. In
terms of process, are we? And I just want to make sure. At this point, I am aware that the staff is doing our due diligence in terms of just identifying any potential conflicts of interest that may not have been disclosed. Is there any thought to contacting the applicants themselves, or is it just something that will lead to the interview process? At this point, it would just lead to the interview process. There is still some time. I don't know if our research if it seems like it would really materially affect our interview process, it may be the case that we'll have reason to follow up between now and then, but that's not the plan at this time. Yes, I would ask, maybe ask Marion in terms of process and procedure, what her thoughts are in terms, or any recommendations she might have in terms of giving in terms of the process that we're currently undertaking, which is to do our due diligence, would it make sense to contact, or would you recommend that we contact or not contact the candidates? They did have an opportunity to divulge these issues in the application process, but would it make sense from a standardized I'm just thinking about treating every candidate fairly from that angle, making sure that they all have an opportunity to share any conflicts of interest they might have if they didn't do so already because of, for whatever reason that may be.
Well, first of all, I'm not the person doing the conflict of interest checks at all, but I think that you're correct that you ought to be treating them all the same. And from Commissioner Sadwani's point of something might have been inadvertently overlooked, rather than play a gotcha game during the interview, if you find something and want to ask about it further, I think that should be a standard question that gives everyone the chance to correct the application beforehand.
Maybe the way to do that, I suppose, would be to provide each applicant with the research product from our background checks before the interview. But that would commit us to doing so for all six.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. My only concern is making sure we give every applicant the same amount of time to respond. I don't have a sense of when that, I'm just trying to pull up a calendar, my apologies. I don't have a sense of when the full due diligence examination will be done. So I just want to make sure that we can complete the review of all 5 applicants and then enter into a phase of alerting them to anything that we found that they perhaps want to make a statement about, just so that they all have the same amount of time.
We have 12 days between now and the beginning of interviews. I don't think the checks will be done till at least a week, I'm guessing. It's quite a bit of work to do. Mm-hmm. So that would give maybe just a couple of days and a weekend to applicants.
I'm just thinking maybe even a standardized a note to, maybe note is the wrong word, but just communication to all of the, a written communication to all of the applicants, just informing them that we are doing our due diligence and if they for some, giving them the opportunity to elaborate on their conflict of interest and I believe we are looking at conflict of interest for all the key, not just for the firms, but also for the key individuals that are participating in their proposal. So just giving them the opportunity to provide additional information. If we're doing it for one, I just think we should do it for all of them. And I don't, at this point, I don't think we've done it for anybody, but if we do decide to move forward, we just want to be consistent and have a standardized communication,
Sure.
The same language for everyone, the same time frame as Commissioner Sadwani said for response, just so that we have all of the information, given that this is such an important issue in terms of impartiality and the perception of impartiality, especially when it comes to the VRA Council and litigation counsel that'll be assisting us and their central role in our process. I would welcome I think more information is better than less, and the more information we have, and the public has, the more transparent the process and the more comfortable we can be in our decisions.
Sure, more information is definitely better. At the same time, the applications themselves ask for a very full and detailed set of conflicts of interest and so forth. So and qualifications. So I'm not sure what a general ask would accomplish beyond that.
I tend to agree with you, Commissioner Chair Yee. I think that we've asked for those disclosures. That was a part of the RFI. If it was an inadvertent thing, then that's, that's fine. I don't necessarily see the need of sending a communication. I'm also not against it. That's fine. If we want to send a notice and say, we are conducting our due diligence at this point in time. If you have any additional disclosures that you wish to make, please do so prior to your interview. And we can set a date for that, perhaps even of Sunday, the 21st, so that we can have them ready to go Monday morning prior to the start of those interviews, or even the Friday the 19th, perhaps. My other thought here is that if we could ask Tina, our paralegal, to try and complete the review of all of our candidates by Wednesday, March 17th. That's 1 week from today. And if need be, perhaps we can assist her with that as needed. Then on Thursday, March 18th, anything that pops up, anything that we have found for any of the 5 candidates, any members of their teams, we would contact all candidates on Thursday, March 18th, and they would have a day or the weekend to respond. Something along those lines. I don't, what do you all think about a calendar as such? That way it's equal, everyone's being treated the same. They do have an opportunity to know what we found, so we're not entering into a gotcha moment. Something along those lines.
For me, the most important thing is just standardization and consistency. So the language should be the same. Language that is used should be the same. And so whether it's after we've identified any potential conflict of interest that have not been divulged or expressed, or if we're doing more general communication, whatever it may be, it's just as long as it's standardized, I think I'd be comfortable with that process.
I think that's fine, because the email communication can be standardized, and if there were no conflicts that we found, then in that section it can be no conflicts found, right? I certainly support that.
Okay, how about if I'll work with Tina to send out an email to all the applicants immediately. Just a general request for any further information they'd like to add to their application. I'll check with her to see if 1 week to get the research done seems reasonable. And if it does, we'll also include some language about our intention to provide them with the results of our research and invite them to probably respond, I don't know, in the interview. Do we expect them to respond in writing in 1 or 2 days to anything we found? Does that sound good?
Yeah, my sense is they're excellent law firms. If they want the job, they'll respond in 1 or 2 days.
They work weekends. Okay, so we'll make that our intention and proceed with that. Very good.
I would prefer that the communications come in writing, just so that just so that there's documentation of it. Yes, it'll be documented in the interview process, but in terms of transparency, if it comes in writing, then we can also post it to the public so that they can see it as well.
That's right.
Okay, so but there would have to be a deadline for that then, maybe midnight Sunday, I guess.
Freddie's going to love that, putting it on Wednesday.
Okay.
Marion, I saw earlier you had your hand up. Does this process all sound
Yes, I was going to make
equitable?
the same point about how anything that is given out and going to be discussed at the meeting would have to be made public.
Would that include the emails that we send out to the applicants, especially if we have are finding things on multiple applicants? Should those emails also all be made public?
Yes.
Or just their responses?
I think that you're providing additional direction of how you want people to supplement their applications, so that should be made public.
Okay.
How about our work product of research details? Is that something that should be publicly posted?
The question is whether Tina is working under the direction of an attorney for it to be attorney work product, and I'm not aware that she is.
Wow. Okay.
So therefore, it'll be made public. Yeah. That's fine.
Glad we asked that question. Very good. Shall we move on to the interview questions? Why don't we go ahead and start with the VRA interviews questions? We have 13 in the draft. I'm thinking we should maybe make a goal of getting it down to about 10. This has a guesstimate of what we could actually cover. The caller's suggestion this morning, I think those were all actually excellent suggestions. I actually did look up collapsed districts, and there is actually such a thing.
Which question was it where the collapse
VRA number
occurred?
2, number in the third line.
Forms.
Majority, minority districts, influence districts,
yeah.
and collapse districts.
Oh no, I wrote this question. I think it should be it is coalition districts.
Yeah, apparently a collapse district is just a district that used to be 2 districts, right? So yeah.
Sure, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
no, this is meant to be coalition.
Okay, excellent. Given that we're asking about coalition districts there, I think we can strike question 8, which is actually a question I submitted because it asks the same thing, basically about coalition districts, whether they would
which one?
qualify. Question number 8.
Question 8. Okay.
Whether a coalition district could qualify under the jingles provision as a potential VRA district. So why don't we go ahead and strike number 8?
Okay.
I
Question
wouldn't
about-
be opposed to asking about the jingles preconditions, but if it was broader, if the question was broader and how it might, but I'm comfortable with striking it as well, Commissioner Yee.
Okay, thanks. With question number 5, in the second sentence, the part about preclearance, do we want to ask about that since preclearance is off the table at the moment?
No, maps to be. Well, yeah, this at least that second half of it is a moot point for sure.
Yeah.
What should be included in the report? I don't know if we need to necessarily ask this. I think this was one of those questions that was left over from 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had a 2010 example to go on. It was actually quite succinct, shall we say, and it's in
Maybe
what was
just to
reported on
clarify that
development.
the pre-clearance requirement no longer exists under current law.
Correct, exactly. Yeah.
So should we just strike number 5 entirely?
I would feel comfortable with that.
That's fine. Let's see, the other one I was wondering about is number 11, about racially polarized voting and the CVRA.
I'm in favor of keeping this question. I think California is such a unique state because we are a very multiracial state. The CVRA has been used extensively throughout the state, particularly in local jurisdictions such as city councils and school boards and counties. While we as a commission are not held to the CVRA because it's those localities are simply not within our jurisdiction, I do think that there are very similar kinds of tests that are being used in the CVRA cases that may be something that could inform our process. So to me, I'm in favor of this question. California is not, when the Voting Rights Act was first developed, we were thinking predominantly about southern states. We're thinking in the 1960s in particular about black and white communities. That is not California, right? California is a much more diverse state than that, and therefore our VRA considerations are much more distinct. And I think the CVRA could help in some regards, or knowledge of the CVRA or understanding of how the CVRA works in those local governments could be helpful. Understanding vote dilution at the local level could certainly be informative in general to our process. So I would be curious to hear what
all good. We can keep
what
it.
councils would say about that.
All good. We can keep that then. How about number 12, the next one? You think that's worth asking?
This is an interesting one because to me, this is asking what kinds of attacks might California come under, or what kinds of attacks to redistricting generally might occur nationally, and what will be the position of California. So while this question doesn't necessarily inform our process of redistricting, I think it can help us hear. Ultimately, we're going to be hearing from a lot of experts throughout this interview process. And what I think it can allow us to do is hear a little bit more about our general positioning in a nationwide debate over redistricting.
Okay, that's fine. We can keep that one. Let me take a look at the caller's suggestions.
Just on that question, I don't like the wording, and I don't want to get stuck on wording. But the equal protection standard was attacked nationally. Maybe something like challenged nationally, or might be less. It almost implies I just would feel more comfortable with something less, maybe challenged national, or challenge. The equal protection standard was challenged.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Just to tone down that language.
Just to see if they even know what, because I'd be concerned if they didn't know what the case was and the implications of that case on the equal protection standard, right? And the rest of it I am fine with.
Mm-hmm.
In terms
so
of
then we can just
anticipating issues that might come before the Supreme Court, and that seems fine.
So we can strike out. I guess
I don't want to wordsmith. That one.
No. That's helpful. I wasn't taking notes on this. Do we have anyone taking notes? I realize Alvaro's also not here. Okay. Okay.
I'm taking notes.
So in 12, then striking attacked nationally too was challenged. I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay, we can keep that with word change. While we're at the bottom of the page, while we take a look at 13, the caller suggested that we change the wording there as well, so that fairness is not misconstrued as partisan competitiveness or partisan fairness.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is I'm okay with partisan fairness if we want to go that route, but I don't actually think this question's asking about partisan fairness.
Right, the caller was suggesting we want to make clear we're not asking about partisan fairness because that's what might come to mind. For instance, in Arizona, competitiveness is a redistricting criteria. For us, it's not. So.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think we could remove that first sentence, and as well as fairness from the second sentence, and just start the question, how would you advise the commission negotiate across multiple criteria, which we have?
Okay.
For example, and then continuing on, I think the rest of it sounds fine.
Okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
So we'll strike that.
It does. How would you advise the commission negotiate fairness? That's still, the fairness is still in there.
No, we'd
But-
remove that.
Oh, you're removing that? Sorry, I think I missed that.
Yeah,
So
just-
Can you just read out what the question is now, Commissioner Yee or Chair Yee?
Sure. How would you advise the commission to negotiate across multiple criteria? For example, how would you advise the commission to negotiate the demands of racial equity established within the VRA while avoiding making race the predominant criterion or motive?
And that comes out of Supreme Court, I think it's Miller, in which the Supreme Court has said that race cannot be the predominant criterion or motive, but you still also have to be compliant to the VRA, right? So it creates this challenging dichotomy, right? And so the question then is like, well, how do you meet the standards of the VRA without making race the predominant criterion of our redistricting process, right? And of course, as California state law outlines, we have other criterion that we have to uphold. Equal population.
We may want to make this sentence a little bit clearer, I think, in terms of what criteria. So maybe it's exactly what you just said, standard VRA across multiple standard VRA criteria, or just to make it a little bit clearer.
Maybe just ask that specific example then, and not.
Or maybe ask a specific example.
Yeah. So just how would you advise the commission negotiate, basically the demands of racial equality and so forth. So instead of that just being a for example, make that the question. How would you advise the commission negotiate the demands of racial equality established within the VRA and so forth?
I'm okay with that. Perhaps just then an opening statement, and I'm sorry to be wordsmithing here, just a simple opening statement. For me, I'd like to see councils demonstrate their understanding of the multiple criteria that we are held to here in California, particularly recognizing that some will have experience outside of California where there are different criteria. So perhaps an opening statement such as the commission is held to multiple criteria when it comes to redistricting, and then as you both suggested, get rid of the for example. How would you advise the commission to negotiate the demands of racial equity, et cetera?
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, I'll make that change. Okay, we're thinking, I'm thinking with the caller suggestion to adding a question. We're supposed to be striking questions. Adding a question about how the candidate envisions working with everyone else, including the litigation counsel and the line drawer and staff and commission. So just a catch-all question about that. And I'll figure out a way to word that. The last item the caller suggested was a question about to the VRA council specifically about how to use the time before census is released. Census data is released. Let's see, can we add that to any of the existing?
I think question 1. Actually, it doesn't need to be question 1, but it's such a broad question. What will be the most significant and challenging issues arising from new census data? Well, it's going to be months late. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the caller's suggestion there of how will they use that time.
Okay, we can just add that. I'll add that. A second sentence, how to use the delay.
The other suggestion from the caller was that I found helpful was also in terms of number of questions. That 13 questions is a lot of questions for an hour interview, and maybe that's okay, given that we're going to be given that the questions are public, but it doesn't really provide any applicant to go into depth in too much depth on any of these issues.
Sure. Okay. So we struck 2, number 5 and number 8, and then we're adding one about how to work with others, so that we're at 12.
And to me, it sounds like we're almost adding but maybe we're constraining question number 1, but almost is like another question that was added to number 1 as well. But I can see it being a constraining, right, and limiting that question as well. So,
were there any other questions either of you thought might be struck?
I think number 3 could be struck. I don't think there's enough examples necessary. Well, I don't know. I guess it could work, especially for VRA council. I don't know that VRA needs to be asked this question about boards and commissions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's kind of vague. I'm comfortable striking it. Okay, that would take us to 11. So we want to find one more.
And if these are all important, I'm fine with us keeping them. It's just, we just have to understand that the applicants will have limited amount of time to respond.
To actually respond, yeah.
Well, lawyers talk fast, right?
I could see also removing question 7. It's highly speculative. I think it's an important question in general, but I think that we'll figure that out. We'll have to figure that out regardless.
Yeah, that did get mentioned in the full commission yesterday, but I can see that it is speculative, and we have no idea if it'll pass or which parts will pass.
Right,
any of that.
exactly.
And what will apply to us, even if it does pass.
That's right. And yeah, and the response to this could go on and on, quite frankly, right? Like there's the Arizona case before the Supreme Court. There's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and Advancement Act. So yeah.
Okay.
And it's all speculative. We don't know what will or will not pass.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting, but we are trying to whittle it down. So, okay, we'll strike number 7, and that takes us to 10.
Did you want to get in there, Commissioner Toledo? I saw you raise your hand.
Maybe we can go over the questions that we have left after our striking, just to make sure that we're covering all the substantive areas we want to cover, and make sure that we're not neglecting any area.
That's fine. I will send out. Yeah, my intention. We can go over it right now quickly. Then I'll send out a draft.
Okay.
That you can look at before we post it. So shall I go over it now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Just so we can.
So keeping number 1 with an addition to ask about how to use the delay in the census release. Keeping number 2, changing collapse to coalition. Striking number 3. Keeping number 4 as is. Striking number 5. Keeping number 6 as is. Striking 7 and 8. Keeping number 9 as is. Keeping number 10 as is. Keeping number 11 as is. 12, changing attacked to challenged. And then 13, keeping with the various changes we mentioned. And then adding a 14th, which will be 10th, about just how do you intend to work with these various other parts of our effort.
Do we want to keep 9 in there? I mean, is that a part of our decision-making process, is whether or not they would keep the RPV analysis confidential or made public? I mean, that kind of comes down to whether or not we anticipate it being a piece of potential litigation. I don't know for me if that issue, it's an important issue, but I don't know if it determines who I would select for VRA counsel necessarily.
Yeah.
I would agree with Commissioner Sidwani on that. I don't think this adds anything.
Okay. Yeah, I suggested that question just because it keeps coming up, right? But you're right,
Yeah.
it wouldn't make a difference in deciding one or the other.
Yeah,
So,
and
that's fine.
it is an important one that we'll have to figure out, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't help us decide on whom to hire. So, okay, we'll strike number 9. Okay, I will send out a draft of those. Let's go ahead and take a look at the litigation counsel questions.
So then in total, are we down to how many questions? 9?
I think we're down to 9. Yeah.
In 1
so-
hour?
Yeah.
Do we feel good about that? Or should we pare down more?
I mean, ultimately, they'll have these questions ahead of time, and we'll be able to answer those questions they feel that are strongest, right? So it's by having the 9, it also gives them an opportunity to really focus on the questions that they are strongest on, and or to determine how they answer them within an hour, within an hour's time frame.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be fine with paring it down a little bit more if the questions that we leave are such that they'll be substantive enough to help us in our deliberation process. These are all important questions.
They are.
But if we can, so I'm comfortable either way, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, when we were hiring for staff, certainly the response times vary, very widely. So, which was
So what
That's
we maybe
true.
could do, is for us, for our purposes, right? The ordering is important. Maybe putting the important questions that we absolutely want answered on the top, in case we can't get to questions at the bottom for some reason. So we could reorder so that, but these all seem important questions to me. So that may be a little bit, maybe not equally important, but important nonetheless.
I'm pretty confident we can get through them. I mean, we're not asking for exhaustive answers. We're judging, what can you say in 4 minutes about this topic, right?
Correct. And I think in my review of the VRA applicants that we've received, I'm not concerned that any of them don't have expertise in the VRA. Like these are actually softball questions in some regards to VRA experts. So I'm comfortable with that, and I think it will be interesting to see the different approaches that the teams will take in their responsiveness.
When I send out the draft, you can suggest any reordering. Maybe I'll even try to take a stab at reordering, but that would be fine.
Yeah, the one that just sticks out to me is the question about the budget, as it's kind of like smack dab in the middle of like VRA questions. So either maybe first or last on that one might make sense. And then similarly with the what is currently question 6 around being nonpartisan and objectivity. I think if there were any, particularly for, of course, we're doing our due diligence for all applicants. If there are issues that arise for any of them, to me, that's where this kind of comes up.
Okay.
And so again, right now, that's kind of in the midst of all of these VRA questions. So maybe first or last, or a section that is more specific to those criteria.
Okay. Let's take a look at the litigation counsel questions. There are 9 in the draft. Number 3, the budget question, we can similarly move down, perhaps to last. I don't think the caller referred to any of these, so. I thought they were all worth keeping.
I mean, I question number 9, in particular the last portion of it, we may want to consider rewording. How might the experience of the VRA impact our ability to, the CVRA impact our ability to defend racial consciousness? How would you defend the constitutionality of majority, minority, influence, or coalition districts that the commission may have to draw?
Mm-hmm.
How might the experience of...
Well, there is currently a case before the California Supreme Court that asks this kind of question around vote dilution under the CVRA. If it is found, right, that influence districts should not be protected under the CVRA, how do we then protect, if we end up drawing influence districts, you know, in these other jurisdictions, how do we defend that? Is it a problem, right? Will there then be conflicts, right, between state law and the federal VRA? And if so, how might that play out for us?
If I could add, your first criteria is to follow federal law. So if there were a conflict between the two, you would have to apply federal law.
Yeah. But that would that leave us open to potential litigation, knowing that there is a standard in California for the CVRA, which again, I recognize we are not held to, but on a very similar issue around vote dilution. This would be the team that would have to.
It depends on how the California Supreme Court words its decision. I could see that as a possibility, but not necessarily.
Sure, right.
I mean, it all suddenly seems more possible than it did a time ago, you know, not that long ago, for sure.
I mean, maybe, perhaps I'm just curious. Maybe if the question more focused more on a vote dilution rather than that might make it a little bit, as opposed to just the California Voting Rights Act, but rather vote dilution in general, from, because there are challenges to the Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act, and it all comes down to essentially vote dilution.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so how might we reword this then?
Please defend racial
Are
consciousness.
you suggesting just remove this sentence? How might the experience of the CVRA impact our ability to defend racial consciousness?
Yeah, that was my suggestion, but then perhaps adding something about how would you defend the constitutionality of majority, minority, influence, or coalition, or I think we changed that to or coalition districts that the commission may have to draw. Adding something about a vote dilution in there. How do you? And I don't know the exact wording right now. I haven't really come up with it, but something specifically around protecting the rights of. I'm actually not sure what the word would be at this point. I'm just I see the spirit in this question. I understand what it is. I just haven't been able to figure out how to reword it to get something that might be useful in determining the qualifications of the litigation firm in deliberation.
I'm not great at thinking out loud, but
Neither.
but I'm happy to try to wordsmith this and send through staff to get to you all to see some alternative versions. I'd be happy to take a closer look at that.
I'm in the same boat. I prefer to not think out loud.
Yes, I don't do my best work that way, but happy to take a closer look at it. Question 9.
Okay, so we'll keep question 9, but our intention is to reword it.
Okay.
Or to at least consider rewording it.
Yeah.
We might end up keeping it, but at least look at different options for it.
Should we, so how about, so striking that one, the next to the last sentence, at least we'll intend to do that. But perhaps some further rewarding as well. Okay, any other edits?
I might just, for question 5, it's asked as a yes/no question, and perhaps we want to reword that also, just so that we're getting a little bit more of a response.
Sure. Okay.
Believe that it's still the case. No.
Yeah.
So
I
perhaps.
also, I mean, in addition to that, maybe we can just change that to with recent changes on the U.S. Supreme Court as opposed to recent conservative shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so it's, because it sounds a little judgmental.
Yeah. How do you believe recent changes in the U.S. Supreme Court may affect this?
Perhaps to what extent? To what extent do you believe recent changes on the Supreme Court
Okay.
could impact this? Could impact the
Could impact this case, or could impact the precedents in this case.
Yeah.
Well, the case stands. Would impact
Future examinations of independent redistricting commissions, something like that.
Yeah.
Certainly, we can envision Michigan, for example, might get a challenge to the existence of the commission. I could envision that.
Okay. I'll revise that. Anything else? I guess number 2 is actually a little bit too restrictive because I just asked about working with the VRA Council. So maybe adding a whole additional question about working with line drawer and other staff.
Other members of the team.
I could see that just being added to question 2 as opposed to a secondary question. And then people will answer it perhaps in different ways.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, anything else?
This looks good.
Okay, I will send out a draft of these, and we will have these. The final set of questions will be posted before the interviews on the 22nd. Last item we have to consider is council provisions for council during this process. Our chief counsel position right now is open, and we are in a process of hiring for that, but we don't anticipate that position will be filled before these interviews. We do have, we're grateful to have Marion Johnson as currently as our counsel. The question is whether to supplement Marion's presence with perhaps somebody from the AG's office to have both present during the interviews and deliberations. And since we won't have a chief counsel in place. So thoughts about that?
I mean, I would be supportive of having additional support. Additional support is always a welcome, especially in a process that's so important, such as this one, in terms of providing guidance on the procedural elements. Although I'm very comfortable with Marion's advice in this process, but it's always good to have more advice rather than less.
I would tend to agree. I could really go either way on this. I certainly appreciate Marion's willingness to step in and continue to provide procedural support to the commission and to this committee. I wouldn't also be opposed if we had additional support from the Attorney General's office throughout this process. So.
And this, both the interview process, but also the deliberations, especially the actual ranking and the evaluation of candidates and the eventual decision on whom to recommend. So trying to ensure there's full council coverage for all those stages.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think it wouldn't. I think it only can. It's always can only help support us to have more advice and more guidance than less.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, we're talking about hiring some of the largest contracts in our budget, period, right? I mean, we had like $4 million line itemed for litigation counsel. That's no small amount of the taxpayer dollars. So to make sure that we have, all of the legal support that we possibly need to make the very best decision possible, I'm not opposed to that, to provide that additional support.
It fully lawyered up.
We'll get lawyered up to hire some more lawyers.
And I also want to ensure that that our paralegal has sufficient guidance and advice as well, so that all of our documentation is covered under attorney-client privilege.
Right, and there may be items that come up in this whole process that we're not anticipating yet, but they surprise us. So, okay, I can follow up with our executive director on that, and hopefully have someone in place for the interviews.
Very good.
Okay, the only remaining item then is to anticipate our future, any meetings for the Legal Affairs Committee. I believe there's nothing planned at this moment beyond the interviews. We intend to have a recommendation to the full commission by the end of those interviews and deliberations. So by the end of the 24th.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to try to plan anything after that, or just wait till? Marion?
I would suggest that to finalize your questions, since you've left a few up in the air, that you bring that up under the commission meeting next week and do that in public session for the discussion of finalizing the questions.
Very good. Good idea. We'll do that.
And just to clarify, Marion, can we do that during the full commission meeting? And if we were to do so, other commissioners cannot weigh in during that time. Is that correct? Or should we plan to have a time after the commission has recessed in which just the three of us meet again, just in terms of Bagley King, since we are
If you do it
committee.
as an item during the full commission meeting, then all the commissioners can weigh in.
Okay.
But you can limit it to the questions that you still have remaining on the ones you need to reword.
And that also would allow us to get feedback and guidance from the full commission as well in this process.
Very good.
Even if it's just the three remaining questions we have left. Or a couple of questions we have left.
Okay, I will make sure that happens. Do we want to plan or anticipate any further meetings beyond that, beyond the interviews, basically? We'll have to, there have to be a hiring process, which I guess we'll have to be involved with, right? So.
Yeah, and we should start asking Raul about what the contracting process will look like, and or Marianne, if you have that information of what that process would actually look like. I believe we had entered into an RFI with the understanding that it was an attorney to attorney relationship. So I think then, Marianne, you would probably need to be a part of that contracting process if you feel comfortable doing so, in absence of chief counsel.
Sure.
So to your question, Russell, yes, I think we should just continue to agendize. If we don't need the meetings, then we don't have to use them. But given the fact that there's a 2-week notice time for our meetings, it makes sense just to have them on the agenda and then cancel them, so that if things come up, then it's something that we can discuss.
Okay, should we actually look at a date right now?
Well, my sense is we could just add them onto the committee meetings, no? To the commission meetings, that whole list of days that we added.
Right, including some days which are for committee meetings only. Although I had a question about those because you're not available Wednesday nights, Sarah. So.
Well, that only lasts through April and the first week of May, but yeah, I mean, I think if we can just tag on to, as Alvaro is working on the agendas and posting all of these dates, if we can add. I think what tends to happen is, unless there's something really long, we don't tend to go more than a couple of hours for the Legal Affairs Committee. If we can just tag it on as a standard meeting. Somehow.
Okay, so let's think. Why don't I just take a look at the upcoming meetings then, and pick one that makes sense, and anticipate adding.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It may make sense to just add them to all maybe not the single day meetings, but the meetings where we have multiple days, to just add a couple days, or maybe even to the single days, because it's just one day, and just add them in case we add meetings in case we need it, given that the contracting process will be happening likely in the month of April.
Correct.
And we may need to meet to just to go through that process.
That's right, and especially because we're asking questions about what can we do on VRA to prepare ourselves for VRA prior to census data. You can imagine in May or June we might want to figure that out. I don't know if we want to continue to do that through the Legal Affairs Committee or through the VRA Committee. I think we can also determine those kinds of components as well.
Yeah, you'll be chair in April, Pedro.
Good luck with that contract.
Right now, we actually have a proposed agenda item for the March 29/April 1 meeting to hire. Would we need a separate LAC meeting to prepare for that, or is the full commission agenda item sufficient?
I think we need to learn more about the contracting process in order to answer. I would need to learn more about the contracting process in order to answer that question.
So perhaps we can ask Raul to provide and Marion to help us do more of a calendaring. What are the steps? What's more of a project management type of document or memo that just explains the next steps for the next month and a half as we go through the contracting process.
That sounds good. I'll request that. Okay. With that, anything else?
I think your question was, do we need a meeting prior to the 29th to do any prep work? Is I think, or maybe I misinterpreted.
I'm just wondering in general, after we make our decision, let's assume the full commission does approve our recommendation, and then we need to go forward with the hiring process. So the question is whether we need to now agendize any meetings to do that. So, since we're going to have to see this memo, a timeline memo, to really have a better sense of it, even taking action on the 29th/1st, we're not sure about that yet. It may happen that quickly, or we may need to do more work before we're ready for that.
Thank you. I think I know we're almost at 11 o'clock. Just and I don't know if this is the right place to ask this question, or maybe it's at a future meeting, or maybe even next at the next commission meeting. But in terms of our recommendation, because whatever we decide should be standardized, are we planning to recommend one candidate from each of this pool for the VRA or the litigation? Could it be two candidates? I mean, I'm sure it could be two, but what is our intention as a committee? Do we plan to recommend one candidate, two candidates per each for each one of these RFIs, or is there intention to just select to narrow it down to one, or do we want to leave it a little bit more open? And I guess the question becomes, can we leave it open?
Sure.
And I'm not sure if this is the right question to have now. I know it's the right question to have an open in an open meeting such as this. I just don't know if right now is the right time, or if we want to
I would suggest you wait until after you see your candidates and think if there are two that you want to recommend or only one. You'll know more after you do your interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so wait until after the interviews is recommendation.
I mean, I think it would make it easier on the full commission if we have one clear recommendation for each position, and we recommend that they go forward. If we are just stuck trying to decide between two, then maybe we end up bringing that before them, but I don't think anybody prefers that. So, But yeah, I think Marion's right. I think when we actually see and actually start ranking, we'll know where we stand with that. But a good question. I don't think so. We have not decided that, and yeah.
And I think that is an appropriate. This would maybe the appropriate path forward is to just wait until we see the candidates. And we do the interview process to determine how many individuals will move forward in the recommendation process.
Right. We have said we do intend to rank candidates. So the question is whether any of those will be a tie, I suppose. Okay. Anything else? We need to take public comment before we close. So let's go ahead and bring back Katie. For our closing public comments.
Yes, Chair. Oops. My instructions were stuck. Okay. In order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the commissioners will be taking public comment by phone. The Legal Affairs Committee will be taking public comment by phone. To call in, dial the telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853 5247. When prompted, enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed. It is 969-8065-6065 for this meeting. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you'll be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press star 9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says, "The host would like you to talk." Please press star 6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure to mute your computer or live stream audio to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak, and again, please turn down the live stream volume. And the Legal Affairs Committee is taking their closing public comment at this time, and there is no one in the queue.
Thank you, Katie. We'll wait a minute. I should mention I'm glad to see that we do have all 5 applicants, 6 applications lined up for interviews, including including all of them. Glad to see
I'm
that.
not sure if that got posted to the website or not yet. Or it will.
Yes, it's part of the agenda for that meeting. The full interview schedule is included.
For the 22nd. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So each of those days we intend to have interviews. Those last till 2 p.m. each day, Monday and Tuesday. That'll give us a couple hours after the interviews for our preliminary discussions and perhaps even preliminary rankings. Wednesday, the 24th, the entire day as needed, will be for further and final discussions and rankings.
The instructions are complete. It's been 2 minutes.
We'll just wait just a moment. Okay, well, seeing no callers, if there are no other business, this meeting of the Legal Affairs Committee, as well as the March 8th full commission meeting, is now adjourned.